I filled his cup with poison 3 times, but only on the 3rd time did he drink it all. That's how I rid the world of that monster without anyone ever suspecting. Good morning, my dears. This is Grandma Jenny, 73 years young, speaking to you from my porch in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The sun is shining bright outside, but inside my old ceiling fan does the trick, just like I dealt with the problems life threw my way. Today I'm going to share a story I've kept secret for almost 20 years. A story of love, pain, and justice that I'm only now brave enough to tell. Before I begin this difficult journey, I'd like to ask a small favor from the heart. Please subscribe to Grandma's channel, give this video a thumbs up, it costs nothing, and let me know in the comments what corner of this beautiful country you're watching from. This helps this old lady continue sharing her stories and perhaps help other women going through difficult times like I did. Let's go back to 1967, when I met my Jack. Lancaster was already a bustling town, filled with tourists drawn to Amish country. But our life was simple, like most families in rural Pennsylvania back then. I was 18 and worked in my father's general store. That's where I first saw Jack when he came in to buy molasses and flour. Tall, with dark hair, a well-trimmed mustache, and eyes that seemed to smile before his mouth did. Jack was different from the other young men in town. It wasn't just his appearance, it was his manner, polite without being pretentious, speaking softly but with confidence. He had just moved from Harrisburg to work as a carpenter in his uncle's workshop. "Miss, could you tell me where the First Methodist Church is?" he asked after paying for his purchases. That deep voice, that accent slightly different from ours, I felt butterflies in my stomach like never before. "Just follow this street to the end and turn right. You can't miss it." "Thank you kindly. May I ask your name?" "Jenny," I replied, feeling my face flush. "Pretty name for a pretty girl," he said, and left the store leaving a trail of Old Spice cologne that stayed with me all day. In the following days, Jack appeared at the store with increasingly flimsy excuses. One day it was salt he needed, the next day some coffee, then soap. Even my father noticed. "This young man either has the most disorganized house in the world or he's interested in my daughter," he commented one night during dinner, making me choke on my mashed potatoes. It didn't take long for the interest to become too obvious to deny. On a Sunday afternoon after church, Jack asked my father's permission to take me for ice cream in the town square. I nearly died of embarrassment, but inside my heart was dancing with happiness. That ice cream began a love story that lasted more than 30 years. Jack was everything a girl could dream of. Hardworking, respectful, affectionate without being forward. Our courtship was modest as the customs of the time demanded, always with some relative nearby. But even that couldn't diminish the electricity between us when we were together. "I'm going to work hard, save money, and give you a good life, Jenny," he promised me. And unlike so many men who only make promises, my Jack kept every word. In 1969, 2 years after we met, we married in a simple ceremony at First Methodist. Me in a white dress, sewn by my mother, him in a suit borrowed from his uncle, but rich in love and dreams. Our honeymoon was in Atlantic City, 3 days in a simple but clean boarding house, seeing the ocean I had never seen before. It was my first time leaving Lancaster, my first time seeing the ocean, my first time giving myself to a man. Everything with my Jack tasted like a first time, like something new, like discovery. We returned to Lancaster and lived in a small room at the back of his uncle's house while we saved money for our own home. Jack worked at the carpentry shop Monday through Saturday, and I helped by making pies to sell. Every penny was carefully saved, every sacrifice worth it, because we were building our future together. In 1970, I discovered I was pregnant. Jack's happiness couldn't be contained. He went around telling everyone he was going to be a father, already planning the toys he would make for his child in the workshop. I prayed every night thanking God for the family we were forming. But God had other plans. In my 5th month of pregnancy, I began to feel strong pains, and before we could do anything, I lost the baby. It was a boy. We were going to name him Joseph, after Jack's father. We buried our son in a small white coffin, and with him, we buried a piece of our hearts. Many marriages don't survive such a loss, but my Jack, oh, my Jack surprised me once again. Instead of pulling away, he drew closer. Instead of blaming me, he consoled me. Instead of seeking comfort in whiskey as so many men do, he sought it in faith and work. "God knows what he's doing, Jenny," he would say when he found me crying. "Our Joseph is up there watching over us, and one day we'll have other children." And we did. In 1972, our Mary was born, strong and healthy like her father. 2 years later came John. In 1977, we completed our family with the arrival of Lucy, our youngest. 3 children, 3 blessings that filled our house with noise, chaos, and love. By then, we already had our own house. Simple, but ours. Jack had prospered in the carpentry business, becoming his uncle's partner. I took care of the children and sold my pies, which became famous in town. We had a good life, not of material wealth, but rich in love, respect, and everyday happiness. My loves who are watching me, you can't imagine how important it is to have a companion who values you, who respects you, who shares the joys and sorrows. My Jack was never one of those men who think housework is women's work. He would come home from the workshop and immediately help with the children, change diapers, give baths, tell stories. On Sundays, he insisted on giving me time off. He would prepare lunch, not always good, but made with so much love that nobody complained. Take the children to play in the park, let me rest or visit my friends. Once a month, even when money was tight, he made a point of having a date night with me. He would send the children to sleep at my mother's house, buy a bottle of cheap wine, prepare the house with candles and flowers from our yard. We would dance in the living room to the sounds of the old radio, make love as if we were still those young people who met at the general store. That's how we kept the flame alive for so many years. Those of you watching, wherever you are, leave in the comments if you've known a love like this, so committed, so supportive, or if you're still looking. I believe there are other men like my Jack out there. They're just harder to find than gold in a mine. The years passed. Our children grew up. Mary became a teacher, married a good man from the neighboring town. John followed in his father's footsteps in carpentry, showing the same talent for turning wood into art. Lucy, always the studious one, got a scholarship and went to college in Philadelphia, the first in the family to get a university degree. In 1997, when we had been married for almost 30 years, Jack fulfilled another dream of ours. He bought a larger piece of land on the outskirts of Lancaster and built a house with his own hands. A spacious house with a wraparound porch, a large yard where we planted a bit of everything: apple trees, cherry trees, strawberries, peppers, herbs. A little piece of paradise that we conquered with much sweat. It was in that house that we lived the best years of our lives. With the children grown, we had more time for each other. On Sunday afternoons, we would sit on the porch, drinking fresh coffee, eating cornbread, and watching the sun set behind the hills. Jack would always pick up his guitar, playing those old tunes that made me cry with emotion. That simple was our happiness. The grandchildren began to arrive, filling the house again with laughter and running around on weekends. Jack was a doting grandfather, making wooden horses, dollhouses, tops, all the toys the children asked for. And he told stories. Oh, how my Jack knew how to tell stories. He would invent such tales that even I, who knew all his fibs, would stand there listening, enchanted like the children. When Jack turned 60 in 2007, we had a big party in the backyard. The whole family came, friends, neighbors, even people we barely knew, but who had some good story to tell about my husband. Because Jack was like that. He left a good mark wherever he went. I never saw a man so beloved in the community, so respected without needing to demand respect, so loved without demanding love. At that party, watching my husband surrounded by people who loved him, I thought to myself, I'm the luckiest woman in the world. 40 years with this man, and I still fall in love with him anew every day. I had no idea our happiness was numbered. I didn't know that would be Jack's last birthday party. I had no clue fate was preparing the cruelest blow of my life, and that after, it would come another even worse. It was on an April morning in 2008 that I noticed something different about my Jack. We were having coffee on the porch as we always did, him reading the newspaper our son brought from town, me finishing brewing a fresh pot. Suddenly, the cup fell from his hand, shattering on the concrete floor. What a scare, Jack! What was that? He stared at his own hand as if he didn't recognize it. Then he gave me that smile that always melted me and said it was nothing. The cup just slipped. But I knew my husband better than the back of my hand. Something was wrong. That week, I noticed he started dropping more things. The lunch spoon, tools in the workshop, even the soap during his shower. "You need to see a doctor, Jack," I insisted after seeing him drop the third tool in the same day. "It's just fatigue, woman. I haven't been sleeping well, that's all." But it wasn't just that, and deep down, he knew it too. After 2 weeks of insistence, I got him to go with me to the clinic. Dr. Carmen, a young, newly graduated doctor who had come through a government program, examined my Jack carefully. "Mr. Jack," she said with a seriousness that chilled my spine, "I'm going to refer you for some tests in Philadelphia as soon as possible." On the way home, Jack tried to joke to cheer me up. He said it would just be a trip to see the big city again, that it would be nothing. But his eyes didn't lie. He was afraid, and that terrified me more than anything. In 40 years together, I had rarely seen fear in my husband's eyes. We managed to get a ride from a church volunteer to take us to Philadelphia the following week. It was a long, silent journey. Jack held my hand tightly, as if he were clinging to a lifeline. I prayed silently, promising everything to God, to the Virgin Mary, to all the saints, anything so that it wouldn't be something serious. But it was. After a battery of tests, the neurologist gave us the diagnosis that would change our lives forever: amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, as they call it. A disease that would gradually paralyze all the muscles in my Jack's body until he could no longer move, speak, swallow, and finally, breathe. "How long does he have, doctor?" I asked, holding back tears. "It's difficult to say precisely, Mrs. Jenny. The disease progresses differently in each person. It could be a year, it could be 3, rarely more than that. A year, maybe 3. After 40 years together, that's all we had left." We returned to Lancaster in silence, each lost in our own thoughts, our own prayers, our own silent despair. That night, lying in our bed, Jack cried for the first time since I had known him. Not loud sobbing, but silent tears that ran down his tired face as he stared at the ceiling. "It's not fair, Jenny," he whispered. "We still had so many plans." I wiped his tears with the edge of the sheet, swallowing my own. Someone had to be strong at that moment, and my Jack had been strong for both of us his entire life. It was my turn. "We'll make the most of every day we have left, my old man, every minute. I'll take care of you as you've always taken care of me. I'll be your legs, your arms, whatever you need." The following months were an emotional roller coaster. We had to tell the children, which broke our hearts again. Seeing Mary, John, and Lucy crying for their father still alive was like a knife to the chest. But after the initial shock, they rallied around their father like a wall of love. John took over the carpentry business completely so his father could rest. Mary came every day after school to help with the care. Lucy quit her job in Philadelphia and came home to be with us. "My father is more important than any career," she said when I tried to argue. The neighbors, friends, the entire community mobilized. One built a ramp at the entrance of the house for when the wheelchair would be necessary. Another adapted the bathroom. Someone brought different food every day. Another came just to talk and distract Jack. Lancaster showed why it had always been known as a land of faith and solidarity. The disease progressed as the doctor had predicted. First, Jack lost strength in his hands. He who was so skilled with wood could no longer hold a fork properly. Then it was his legs, which began to fail during the morning walks we loved to take. In 6 months, he already needed support to walk around the house. But the worst for my Jack wasn't the loss of mobility, it was the loss of independence. He, who had always been the pillar of the family, the provider, the protector, now needed help for the most basic things. He saw it as humiliation, although I insisted that caring for him was a privilege, not a burden. "You deserve better, Jenny," he would say on nights when sadness spoke louder. "You deserve a whole man, not this half I'm becoming." "Don't say that, Jack," I would reply, lying beside him in bed. "You're the only man I've ever wanted in life, however you may be. In sickness and in health, remember? That's what I promised before God." Even with the disease advancing, we tried to maintain life as normal as possible. On good days, I would take Jack to the porch, and we would sit there, watching the street activity. waving to passing neighbors. He still played a bit of guitar, though with increasing difficulty. He still told stories to the grandchildren, still made me laugh with his silly jokes, still looked at me with those eyes that seemed to smile before his mouth. One thing Jack insisted on, even while sick, was preparing the family for his departure. Not in the financial sense, we never had much, but in the emotional sense. He called each child in private for long conversations. He recorded videos for the grandchildren to watch when they were older. For me, he wrote letters, with Lucy's help when his hands no longer obeyed. Letters that I should open at specific moments after his departure. "This way you'll never be alone," he explained to me. "I'll always be here, guiding you, even when I'm no longer physically present." It was during these months of illness that we got to know Roger better, Jack's younger brother. He had been living in Chicago for more than 20 years, having left Lancaster shortly after we got married. He maintained sporadic contact, a phone call at Christmas, a visit every 5 years. But when he heard about his brother's illness, he came running. Roger was the opposite of Jack in almost everything. Where my husband was calm, he was explosive. Where Jack was generous, he was miserly. Where my old man was hard-working, his brother always seemed to be looking for the easiest way. But he was family, and Jack was genuinely happy with the visit. "My little brother came to see me, Jenny. Isn't that wonderful?" At first, Roger even helped. He spent hours talking with Jack, reminiscing about childhood stories, distracting him from the pain and the difficult situation. He would take him for short car rides around town, something I couldn't do alone. He seemed genuinely concerned about his brother's well-being. But soon, I began to notice strange things. Roger would rummage through drawers when he thought no one was watching. He asked insistent questions about money, about the house, about the carpentry business. And he looked at me in a way that gave me chills. It wasn't the look of a brother-in-law. It was the look of a predator assessing prey. I mentioned it to Jack, but he, always seeing the best in people, especially family, minimized my concerns. Roger has always been too curious since childhood. It doesn't mean anything. And that way of looking is a family trait. I have it too. You're just misinterpreting. I let it go. Didn't want to worry my husband with what might just be my imagination. After all, we were all stressed, tired, emotionally drained by the situation. Maybe I really was seeing things where they didn't exist. In early 2009, about 10 months after the diagnosis, Jack deteriorated dramatically. He could no longer swallow properly, needed pureed food. His speech became slurred, difficult to understand for anyone who didn't live with him daily. His breathing, increasingly labored, required oxygen equipment that the hospital provided through Dr. Carmen's intervention. That's when I realized the end was near. My Jack, who was never one to give up, began to say goodbye. Not with direct words. His speech was already too compromised, but with gestures, with looks, with weak but meaningful handshakes. One afternoon, while we were alone in the bedroom, he made an enormous effort to speak clearly. "Loved you each day. More than previous," he said with difficulty, tears streaming down his thin face. "Was happier than deserved." "Me too, my old man," I replied, crying with him. "Every day by your side was a gift from God." In the early morning of March 15th, 2009, I woke up with a strange sensation. Something had changed in the room, in the air, in the energy. I looked at Jack beside me and knew immediately. His chest no longer moved. His hand, which I held during sleep as I had done for decades, was strangely relaxed. My Jack had departed during sleep, the way he always said he wanted to go. Without fuss, without drama, like someone who discreetly leaves a party after having a lot of fun. I didn't scream, didn't make a scene. I just lay beside him, embracing his still warm body, and cried silently, thanking him for the 40 years we had together, for the children, for the grandchildren, for every precious memory we built. Only when the sun began to rise did I get up to call the children and give the news that we all knew would come, but for which no one is ever really prepared. The wake was as Jack would have liked, simple, without excesses, but full of people who truly loved him. The house was too small for so many people who came to pay their last respects, people he had helped throughout his life, furniture he had fixed for free, people to whom he had given advice, children for whom he had made toys, each with a good story to tell about my husband. Roger drew attention at the wake with his behavior. While everyone was contained in their grief, he cried scandalously, threw himself on the casket, made scenes that seemed more theatrical than genuine. "My brother, my little brother," he shouted, as if they had been inseparable all their lives and not practically strangers who barely spoke. I found it strange, but attributed it to the different way each person deals with pain. Some people are more contained, others more expressive. It wasn't the time to judge, just to support each other in that difficult moment. After the burial, we returned home, now so empty without my Jack's presence. The children wanted to stay with me, but I asked them to return to their homes, their families, their lives. I needed this time alone, to say goodbye in my way, to begin to learn to live in this world where my companion of 4 decades no longer existed. "You can't stay alone, Mom," insisted John. "Come live with me and Teresa. We have plenty of space." "No, my son. This house was your father's last gift to me. Every corner has a little piece of him. I can't leave here now." Reluctantly, they agreed, but promised to visit me every day, taking turns so that I would never be alone for too long. Roger also offered to stay. "At least until all the paperwork is sorted out," he said. I accepted without thinking much. After all, he was Jack's brother, family, and I confess that the idea of facing the first night alone in that house full of memories terrified me. I didn't imagine that I was inviting the wolf into my sheepfold, that decision made at the moment of greatest fragility in my life would trigger events that would forever change my destiny. The day after Jack's burial, I woke up disoriented. For a second, I searched for his body beside me in bed, as I had done every morning for 40 years. Then reality hit me like a punch to the stomach. He was no longer there. He would never be there again. I cried softly, my face buried in his pillow that still held his scent. That's when I heard knocks on the bedroom door. "Jenny? Are you awake?" "I made coffee." It was Roger's voice. I quickly wiped away the tears and replied that I was coming. I didn't want him to see me crying. Something about the way he looked at my vulnerability deeply bothered me. The first days after Jack's death passed in a kind of fog. I moved around the house like a ghost, mechanically performing daily tasks. My children came every day, as promised. They brought food, news, tried to cheer me up. But as soon as they left, I returned to that state of numbness. Roger seemed to be genuinely trying to help. He took care of the yard that had been Jack's pride, fixed small things around the house, received the condolence visits that were still arriving. At night, he would sit with me on the porch and talk about his brother, recalling stories from their childhood that I had never heard. Jack was always the straight arrow, the responsible one, he would tell. From childhood, he wanted to do everything right, please our parents. I was the opposite, rebellious, stubborn, always looking for the easy way. In these conversations, there seemed to be a kind of regret in Roger, as if he lamented not having been closer to his brother, not having made better use of the years they had. Life passes too quickly, Jenny. One day you're arguing with your brother over something trivial, the next he's dead and you realize you wasted precious time. Those words touched my heart as a recent widow. I also thought about all the little arguments I had with Jack over the years, moments of impatience or irritation that now seemed so insignificant. About a week after the burial, Roger began to talk about practical matters, the house, Jack's assets, how I planned to support myself from then on. Did Jack leave any insurance? Any savings? No, I answered honestly. We never had much. What he earned at the carpentry shop barely covered the family's support. In recent years, with the illness, we spent the little we had managed to save. And the house? Is it in your name? It's in both our names. Now it should pass to me, I imagine. Roger looked thoughtful, as if calculating something. You know that by law, half of my brother's assets should pass to the children, right? And since he didn't leave a will, technically, I would also be entitled to a part. That alarmed me. I had never thought in legal terms. Jack and I always shared everything, without formalities. The idea that someone could claim a part of our house, the last gift my husband had given me, was disturbing. That's not right, Roger. Jack built this house for me, for our family. He would never want it to be divided. Of course, he backed off, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. I'm just explaining how it works legally. Don't worry about it now. But the seed of worry had already been planted. That night, I couldn't sleep properly, thinking about what Roger had said. In the morning, when Mary came to visit me, I mentioned the conversation. Don't listen to what Uncle Roger says, Mom, she reassured me. None of us is going to ask for anything from the house. It's yours. It was yours and Dad's dream. And I'm sure Uncle Roger won't make an issue of it either. Her words calmed me a bit, but something in Roger's behavior had changed. He began to drink more, glasses of wine at lunch, whiskey at night. He would look at me in a way that made me feel uncomfortable, as if he were assessing me. And he made increasingly frequent comments about how I was well preserved for my age. Jack was lucky, he said one night, already visibly altered by drink. 40 years with a woman like you. If it were me, I wouldn't let you out of that bed. I froze at the comment, not knowing how to respond. I pretended not to understand the insinuation and quickly changed the subject. But the feeling of discomfort remained, like a weight in my stomach. On the following nights, I began to lock my bedroom door. I told myself I was being paranoid, that Roger was just a man without social filters, especially when he drank, that he would never do anything against me, the widow of the brother he claimed to love and respect so much. On Sunday, 2 weeks after Jack's death, we had a family lunch. All the children came with their spouses and children. For a few hours, the house came back to life with noise, movement. That brief moment of normalcy was like a balm for my wounded soul. Roger participated in the lunch, more restrained in his drinking because of the presence of the nephews and nieces. He seemed perfectly normal, friendly, even affectionate. Once again, I thought that my suspicions about him were exaggerated, the result of my fragile emotional state. After everyone left, Roger helped me clean the kitchen. We talked about trivial things while washing the dishes, the weather that remained dry, the news on television, how the grandchildren were growing fast. You have a beautiful family, Jenny, he commented, putting away the last glasses. Jack must be proud, looking down from above. I hope so, I replied, feeling the tears return. Whenever I spoke about Jack in the past tense, the reality of his absence hit me with renewed force. Don't cry, said Roger, approaching and placing his hand on my shoulder. Jack wouldn't want to see you like this. The gesture could have been comforting, but there was something more. The hand that slipped from the shoulder to my back, going down further than it should. The body that came too close to mine, the hot breath on my neck. I pulled away abruptly, startled. What are you doing, Roger? Come on, Jenny, don't play dumb, he replied, his voice changing to something I had never heard before, cold, calculating. You think I haven't noticed how you look at me? How you insinuate yourself? You're crazy, I exclaimed, genuinely shocked. I just lost my husband, your brother. So what? Life goes on. You're an experienced woman. I'm a lonely man. We're adults. We know what we want. I tried to leave the kitchen, but he blocked my path, cornering me against the sink. The smell of alcohol on his breath was strong, although he hadn't drunk much during lunch. I realized then that he must have been drinking in secret, probably since early morning. Let me pass, Roger. This isn't right. What isn't right is you playing hard to get after weeks of teasing me, he growled, grabbing my arm forcefully. You think I haven't seen how you sway around the house? How you wear those provocative clothes? I looked at myself, incredulous. I was wearing a long skirt and a long-sleeved blouse. Simple Sunday clothes I had worn for years. Nothing remotely provocative. I realized then that I wasn't dealing with a rational man. The drink, the grief for his brother, or perhaps a malice that had always been there, hidden, had transformed Roger into someone dangerous. Our children will be here any moment, I lied, trying to scare him. John said he'd come back to get the cake pan he forgot. He hesitated for a second, and I took advantage to push him and run to my room. I locked the door and pushed the dresser against it, trembling from head to toe. I heard Roger shouting from the other side, banging on the wood, threatening to break it down if I didn't open. You owe me, you ungrateful bitch. You think I stayed here why? Out of charity? I came to get what's rightfully mine. For hours I stayed huddled on the bed, listening to him wander around the house, breaking things, shouting obscenities, promising that I would pay for rejecting him. At some point, the noise stopped. I thought perhaps he had fallen asleep, too drunk to continue his torment. Around 3 in the morning, when the silence had already lasted for more than an hour, I decided it was safe to leave the room. I needed to reach the phone in the living room to call John. I couldn't spend another minute under the same roof as that man. I silently removed the dresser, unlocking the door with maximum care to not make noise. The house was dark and silent. I walked on tiptoe down the hallway, guided by the weak light coming from the living room window. That's when I felt the blow to the back of my head. I didn't see who hit me, but I knew immediately it was Roger. The pain exploded, blinding, and I fell to my knees. Before I could recover, he grabbed me by the hair, dragging me back to the bedroom. "Thought you could escape, huh? That you'd call your little children to save you?" What followed was the worst nightmare a woman can live through. Roger, the brother of the man I had loved for 40 years, threw me on the bed I had shared with Jack for decades. Right there, in that sacred place of love and respect, he brutally raped me, ignoring my pleas, my screams, my tears. I fought as I could, scratching, biting, pushing, but he was stronger, heavier, more determined. Each time I resisted, he hit me harder, until my body, already weakened by age and grief, simply gave up fighting. "That's it. Now it's better," he murmured, while committing that atrocity. "I always wanted this, you know? Ever since I first saw you, at your father's store. But St. Jack got there first." His words were as painful as the physical act. The revelation that hatred, that sick envy, had existed for decades, fermenting in the soul of that man who called himself my Jack's brother. When he finally finished, he got up as if nothing had happened. He lit a cigarette, looking at me with contempt. "Wasn't a big deal. Jack must have tired of you quickly." I curled up on the bed, my body aching, bleeding in several places, my soul in pieces. Never in all my life had I felt so violated, so humiliated, so destroyed. "Why?" I managed to ask between sobs. "Why do this to me? To your brother's memory?" He laughed, a cold sound that seemed not to belong to a human being. "Jack always had everything: our parents' love, the community's respect, a perfect family, a dedicated wife. Even in death, he came out as a hero, the man who bravely fought against disease." He took another drag on his cigarette before continuing. "And me? I was always the mistake, the problem, the child nobody wanted. Well, now he has nothing. And this house, this life, you, all this should have been mine from the beginning." He left the room, leaving me alone with my pain and horror. I heard him rummaging through the drawers in the living room, probably looking for house documents, money, anything of value he could take. I don't know how long I stayed there, paralyzed. Minutes or hours, it made no difference. My world had just collapsed for the second time in less than a month. When the first ray of sunlight came through the window, something inside me awakened. A primitive survival instinct, perhaps, or the voice of my Jack, whispering from somewhere beyond this life that I needed to fight, that I couldn't let that monster win. With superhuman effort, I dragged myself out of bed. Every movement was agony, both physical and emotional. I grabbed the first clothes I found and put them on, not caring if they were dirty or torn. I slowly opened the bedroom window. I couldn't risk going out the door and encountering Roger again. The window faced the backyard. It was a considerable drop for a woman my age, but at that moment I didn't hesitate. I jumped, landing heavily on the ground. The pain in my knees was excruciating, but I bit my lips to keep from screaming. Crawling among the plants that my Jack had cultivated with such care, I managed to reach the back fence. There was a small gate that we rarely used, but which now represented my only chance of escape. To my surprise and relief, it was unlocked. Perhaps Roger, in his arrogance, hadn't even considered that I would try to escape in that state. Or perhaps it was a last gift from my Jack, taking care of me even after departing. I went out to the deserted street, the sun still low on the horizon. There was no one around, no neighbor awake at that hour. Where to go? My children lived across town. I wouldn't make it there in this state. That's when I remembered Cindy, my younger sister. She lived just 2 blocks away, in a small house she shared with her unmarried daughter. We had always been close, even more so after she became a widow a few years before me. Walking as best I could, supporting myself on walls and trees along the way, I reached her house. Each step was a torment, not only because of my injured body, but because of the shame, the humiliation I carried with me. How would I explain what had happened? How would I put that horror into words? I knocked on her door with the little strength I had left. When Cindy opened, the sun was already fully illuminating my deplorable state. The swollen face, the cut lips, the bloodstains on my clothes, the bruises beginning to appear on my arms and legs. Her eyes widened in shock and horror. "My God in heaven, Jenny, what happened to you?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no sound came out. Instead, my body finally gave in, and I fell unconscious into my sister's arms, the darkness of unconsciousness being a welcome relief after the hell I had lived through. When I woke up, I was lying in Cindy's bed. She had cleaned my wounds, changed my clothes, and was looking at me with a mixture of concern and contained fury. "Who did this to you, Jenny?" she asked as soon as she saw my eyes open. "Was it a robbery? Did someone break into the house?" I tried to speak, but my throat was dry, my voice trapped by pain and trauma. Cindy offered me water, holding the cup so I could drink. That simple gesture of care, so different from the brutality I had experienced hours before, made the tears return in full force. "It was Roger," I finally managed to say, my voice almost unrecognizable even to myself. "Jack's brother? The one who was staying with you?" I nodded, unable to elaborate further, but I didn't need to. Cindy immediately understood what had happened. I saw in her eyes the exact moment when comprehension hit her, followed by a wave of anger so intense that it transformed her usually gentle expression. "That bastard," she whispered, her fists clenched. "I'm calling the police right now." "No," I exclaimed, with more force than I believed I had. "Not the police." "What do you mean, Jenny? He needs to pay for what he did." How to explain my fear, my shame, the reluctance to publicly expose that violation, to have to tell and retell the story to officers, doctors, curious neighbors, to see my children discover what their uncle had done to their mother, to become the widow who was raped by her brother-in-law in the eyes of all of Lancaster? "I don't want anyone to know," I finally said. "I can't, Cindy. I don't have the strength." My sister looked at me for a long moment, the anger in her eyes gradually giving way to a cold, calculating determination that I had never seen in her before. "All right, Jenny. We won't go to the police, for now, but that doesn't mean we're going to let that monster go unpunished. He will pay for what he did. I promise." At that moment, lying in my sister's bed, my whole body aching, my soul in tatters, I couldn't imagine how she planned to fulfill that promise. I had no idea that Cindy, my little sister, who had always been the calm one in the family, the conciliator, the peaceful one, harbored within herself a capacity for justice or vengeance that would soon be revealed, and that this revelation would forever change the course of our lives. I stayed at my sister Cindy's house for 3 days, hidden from the world like a wounded animal. She told my children I was there, but said only that I needed time away from the house I shared with Jack, that the memories were becoming too heavy. They understood, or thought they understood, and respected my space, sending only loving messages through their aunt. In that temporary refuge, while my body slowly recovered from the physical injuries, my mind oscillated between states of absolute numbness and episodes of uncontrollable panic. Sometimes I would spend hours staring at the wall, not really seeing anything. At other times, any louder noise, a door slamming, a pan falling, would make me jump out of bed, trembling like a leaf, ready to defend myself from an attack that existed only in my wounded head. Cindy took care of me like a mother cares for a sick child. She prepared nutritious broths that I could barely swallow, changed the bandages on my wounds with gentle hands, combed my graying hair that had become a tangled mass on the night of the attack. And most importantly, she didn't pressure me to talk, to explain, to decide what to do next. On the morning of the 4th day, as we were having coffee in her small kitchen, Cindy finally broke the silence on the subject that hung between us like a dark cloud. "I received news, Jenny. Roger is still in your house." I felt my stomach turn, dropping the cup I was holding. The hot coffee spread across the table, but neither of us moved to clean it up. How do you know? I have my ways, Cindy replied, with a firmness that didn't match her normally gentle nature. He's there, acting as if the house were his. He told the neighbors you went to visit relatives in Pittsburgh, that you asked him to take care of everything while you were away. That information hit me like a punch to the stomach. It wasn't enough to have violated me in the worst way possible. Now Roger was appropriating my house, my life, erasing my existence as if I were an inconvenience that needed to be removed. We need to do something, Jenny, Cindy continued, placing her hand on mine. He can't just take what's yours. What was Jack's? The mention of my husband's name awakened something in me. A flash of anger, of indignation, that pierced the fog of pain and shame that enveloped me. Jack had built that house with his own hands, for me, for our family. It was our sanctuary, our piece of paradise. And now his own brother, the man who should honor his memory, was desecrating all of that. What can we do? I asked, my voice still weak, but with a different tone than I had been using in recent days. I already said I don't want to go to the police. Cindy looked at me for a long moment, as if assessing whether I was ready to hear what she had to say. Then, with a decision apparently made, she got up and went to her bedroom. She returned with a carved wooden box that I immediately recognized. It had been a gift from Jack to her, years ago. She opened the box on the table, revealing its contents: an old notebook, some yellowed documents, and a small metal key that I didn't recognize. "Remember Grandma Eunice?" Cindy asked, picking up the notebook. Of course I remembered. Our maternal grandmother, Eunice, had been a remarkable figure in our childhood. A strong, independent woman who raised 5 children alone after her husband died in a railroad construction accident. In the 1930s, a widow with 5 small children had few options for survival, especially in rural Pennsylvania. But Grandma Eunice not only survived, she thrived. I remember, of course. What about her? Grandma Eunice wasn't just the faith healer and midwife everyone knew, Cindy explained, carefully opening the notebook. She had other knowledge that the women in our family passed down from generation to generation, but only to those who really need it. I looked at my sister without understanding. What did ancient knowledge from our grandmother have to do with my current situation? Jenny, do you remember the story of Colonel Atkins? The name awakened an old, almost forgotten memory. Colonel Atkins had been the most powerful landowner in the region when we were children. A cruel man, known for abusing the daughters of workers on his farm, for expelling entire families from their lands without warning, for having anyone who dared to challenge him beaten. I vaguely remember. He died when we were little, didn't he? He died, Cindy confirmed, leafing through the notebook until she found the page she was looking for. Of a mysterious illness. Slowly wasting away, losing weight, having terrible hallucinations. The doctors never discovered what he had. And what does that have to do with us? Cindy pushed the notebook to me, pointing to a handwritten page, in an elegant handwriting that I recognized as our grandmother's. "Read this," she said simply. What I saw on that page chilled me. It was a recipe, detailed and precise, for a slow and practically undetectable poison, made with herbs and roots that grew around Lancaster. The recipe was followed by meticulous notes on dosage, expected symptoms, and time until the final result. Are you saying that Grandma Eunice? I'm saying that Colonel Atkins raped our Aunt Josephine when she was only 14 years old, Cindy replied, her voice firm but low, as if she feared the walls had ears. And that Grandma Eunice couldn't go to the police because the sheriff dined at his house every Sunday. She couldn't get justice through official means, so she did it her way. The revelation left me breathless. Our grandmother, the lady respected by the entire community, the faith healer who cured children with herbs and prayers, had deliberately poisoned a man. As terrible as his crime was, and it was terrible, it went against everything I thought I knew about our family, our values. And you're suggesting that I'm suggesting that the justice of men doesn't always serve women, Jenny, especially women like us, already aged, without power, without a voice. If you go to the police, what do you think will happen? At best, they'll doubt you, say you're confused by grief. At worst, Roger, a man, your late husband's brother, will give a convincing story and you'll be the crazy widow who made up a rape. Her words were harsh, but true. I had heard similar stories before, of women who tried to report abuse and ended up even more traumatized by the system that should protect them. I'm not saying it's the only option, Cindy continued, seeing my hesitation. I'm saying it's an option, one that our grandmother used when she had no other alternative. I closed the notebook, pushing it back to my sister. My head was spinning with possibilities, fears, moral doubts. I had been raised to respect the law, to believe in justice, to trust the system. But the system had failed me so many times. When Jack got sick and we needed medications that Medicare didn't provide. When we lost our first baby because the nearest hospital was hours away. I need to think, I finally said. This is too big to decide just like that. Cindy nodded, putting the notebook back in the box. Think, but don't take too long. Each day that passes, Roger establishes himself more in your house, tells his story to more people, makes it more difficult to reclaim what is rightfully yours. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay looking at the ceiling, thinking about what Cindy had revealed, about the options I had before me. I could go to the police, face the painful process of reporting a rape, with all the invasive exams, the humiliating testimonies, the public exposure. I could try to recover my house through legal means, but that would mean a long, expensive, uncertain process. Or I could follow the path of my grandmother Eunice, a dark, dangerous, definitive path. In the early morning, I got up from bed and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. To my surprise, I found Cindy sitting at the table, drinking tea, as if she had been waiting for me. "Can't sleep either?" I asked, sitting across from her. "Not since I found out what happened to you," she replied, pushing an empty cup in my direction and filling it with tea from the kettle. "I keep thinking about what Grandma Eunice would do in your place." "I think we already know what she would do," I replied, taking a sip of the tea. It was chamomile, mild and comforting. "Yes," Cindy agreed, "but the decision isn't hers. It's yours." We sat in silence for a few minutes, each lost in her own thoughts. Outside, a rooster crowed prematurely, announcing a dawn that was still hours away. "If we decide to follow Grandma's path," I began hesitantly, "how would we do it? Roger certainly won't accept anything that comes from me now." A small smile formed on my sister's lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who has just seen a plan forming. "He doesn't need to know it comes from you," she replied, taking the last sip of her tea. "I have an idea." In the following hours, while the town still slept, we elaborated a plan. It wasn't perfect. It had flaws, risks, moments when it would depend more on luck than preparation. But it was a plan. And at that moment, having a plan, any plan, was like a lighthouse on a stormy night. "We're going to need Aunt Jo's help," said Cindy, referring to the oldest daughter of our grandmother, our aunt who had continued Eunice's legacy as a faith healer and knower of country herbs. "She has access to all the plants we need, and no one will question if she's gathering medicinal herbs." I nodded, realizing that Cindy's plan was already more advanced than it initially seemed. She had probably thought about all of this during the days she silently cared for me, planning while I recovered. "And how are we going to get Roger to take whatever it is?" "Leave that to me," Cindy replied, with a confidence that didn't match her normally cautious nature. "Roger doesn't know me well, but he knows I'm your sister. If I show up at the house with a convincing story, he'll lower his guard." The idea of my sister approaching that monster alarmed me. "No, Cindy, it's too dangerous. You saw what he did to me." "He did that to you because he was obsessed, because he had this sick fixation since we were young. With me, it will be different. I'm just the unimportant sister, the spinster he barely noticed when he was here before." I wasn't convinced, but Cindy was right on one point. We needed someone who could approach Roger without raising suspicions, and that someone couldn't be me. When the sun finally rose, our plan was laid out in all possible details. It wasn't a plan to kill. We weren't murderers, despite what Grandma Eunice's notebook suggested. It was a plan to incapacitate, to recover what was rightfully mine, to ensure that Roger could never do to another woman what he had done to me. Aunt Jo arrived shortly after breakfast, bringing a straw bag with fresh herbs. At 78, she was still an impressive woman, tall, thin, with white hair always tied in a severe bun and eyes that seemed to see through the soul. When Cindy told her what had happened to me, not all the sordid details but enough to understand the gravity, her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes darkened. "Some snakes need to have their fangs pulled," she said simply, beginning to sort the herbs on the kitchen table. "I'll prepare something that will make him weak as a chick, confused as a drunk, but alive. Alive to remember every day the evil he did and the punishment he received." While Aunt Jo prepared her mysterious potion, Cindy went out to put the first part of the plan into action. She went to my house, or what had been my house until recently, to scout the terrain, to see how Roger was behaving, if there was anyone else there. She returned a few hours later, her face serious but determined. "He's there, alone," she reported. "Seems like he's been drinking since early morning. The house, Jenny, he destroyed a lot of things. He broke the picture frames with photos of you and Jack, tore the curtains you sewed, is using your bedroom as if it were his." Those words reignited the anger I had briefly felt the previous morning. It wasn't just the attack on my person, it was the desecration of my Jack's memory, the destruction of the home we had built together. This somehow seemed even more unforgivable. "I also discovered something else," Cindy continued, lowering her voice. "He has a gun. I saw it when he opened the dresser drawer to get cigarettes. It's stored there, wrapped in a cloth." The information complicated our plan. It was one thing to confront a violent man, quite another to confront a violent and armed man. "We need to rethink," I said, feeling the fear returning to dominate me. "It's too risky." "No," Cindy replied with surprising firmness. "It's precisely why we need to act soon. If he's armed, the danger only increases with time. And now we know we need to be even more careful." Aunt Jo, who had been listening to the conversation while working, looked up from the dark liquid that was boiling in a small pot. "The preparation will be ready by nightfall," she announced. 3 drops are enough to leave a man without strength in his legs. 5, to leave him delirious for hours. 7, she left the phrase hanging, but the meaning was clear. 7 drops would be fatal. That wasn't our goal. As terrible as Roger's crime was, we didn't want his death on our conscience. We wanted justice, not bloodthirsty vengeance. 5 drops, I said, finally making my decision. Enough to incapacitate him, so we can retake the house without danger. But no more than that. Cindy and Aunt Jo nodded, apparently satisfied with my choice. The plan was set. Cindy would go to my house at nightfall, bringing a bottle of wine as a peace offering. She would tell Roger that I had told her about our fight, brutally minimizing what really happened, and that she was there to mediate, to try to find a solution that worked for everyone. The wine, of course, would be prepared with the 5 drops of Aunt Jo's potion. It would be enough for Roger to take a few sips to begin feeling the effects. When he was completely incapacitated, Cindy would call me, and together we would recover the house, the gun, and any documents he might have found. "And after?" I asked, realizing that our plan only went up to that point. "What do we do with him after?" "We leave him at the bus station, with a one-way ticket to Chicago," Cindy promptly replied. "If he wakes up during the journey, he'll be too far away to easily return. And in the condition he'll be in, he'll just seem like another drunk sleeping on the bus." The plan wasn't perfect, but it was the best we could do under the circumstances. And most importantly, it didn't involve killing anyone, just recovering what was rightfully mine and ensuring that Roger could never harm me again. When the sun began to set, Cindy prepared to leave. She wore a simple but pretty dress, had carefully combed her hair, even put on a bit of lipstick. All to appear as harmless as possible, just a middle-aged woman trying to help resolve a family conflict. "Be careful," I pleaded, hugging her tightly. "If you feel anything wrong, leave immediately. It's not worth risking your life for a house." "It's not just a house, Jenny," she replied, returning the hug. "It's justice, for you, for Jack's memory, for all the women that men like Roger think they can use and discard without consequences." As I watched my sister leave with the carefully prepared bottle of wine, I felt a shiver run down my spine. I was about to do something I never imagined being capable of, using ancestral knowledge to incapacitate a man, to forcibly recover what was taken from me by force. The path of my grandmother Eunice, a path I never thought I would tread. But as Cindy had said, the justice of men doesn't always serve women. And on that April night in 2009, in small-town Lancaster, two gray-haired ladies were about to prove that justice, when denied through official channels, finds other ways to manifest itself. The hours that followed Cindy's departure were the longest of my life. Each minute seemed to drag as if it were a full hour. Sitting in my sister's living room, staring fixedly at the small wall clock, I prayed silently, not just for our souls that were about to commit something that went against all the principles with which we were raised, but mainly for Cindy's safety, who at that moment was in the wolf's den. Aunt Jo stayed with me, silent as a sentinel, her wrinkled hands working non-stop on a crochet that seemed more a way to keep anxiety under control than really producing something. From time to time, she murmured ancient prayers, mixing Catholic saints with entities that had never been mentioned in the church we had attended since childhood. "It will work out," she would occasionally repeat, as if she could see the future in the interlaced lines of her crochet. Justice always finds its way. Around 9 in the evening, when my anxiety was already at its limit, we heard the 3 quick knocks on the door, the agreed signal. I jumped up, ignoring the pains that still persisted in my mistreated body, and ran to open it. Cindy was there, breathless, her face tense but determined. "It worked," she said simply. "He's completely out of it. He drank almost half the bottle before he started to become delirious." "Did he hurt you?" I asked, examining her from top to bottom for any sign of violence. "He didn't have a chance," she replied, with a small, satisfied smile. "Aunt Jo's herbs are faster than we thought." 3 sips, and he already started to sweat. After 10 minutes, he could no longer get up from the chair. Aunt Jo, who had silently approached, nodded with approval. "His body must be weak from the drinking. The mixture with alcohol enhances the effect." "We need to go now," Cindy continued, already pulling a coat for me. "We don't know how long he'll stay like this." The walk to my house was done in silence, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. The night was clear, with an almost full moon illuminating the deserted streets of Lancaster. Few people were out at that hour. Some young people returning home from work, a stray dog or two, no one who paid much attention to 3 ladies walking hurriedly. When we reached the door of my house, the house that Jack had built with so much love for us, I hesitated. It was strange to have to enter furtively into my own home, like a thief. Even stranger was knowing that inside was the man who had destroyed my peace, my security, my trust in the world. "He's in the living room," Cindy whispered, as if she could read my thoughts. "I left him in the big armchair. He can't move properly, but he's conscious. Saying things without meaning, but conscious." I took a deep breath, seeking strength from the depths of my soul, and pushed the door. The smell was the first thing I noticed, a mixture of cigarette, alcohol, and sweat. So different from the lavender and wood aroma that had always characterized our house. It was as if Roger had managed to corrupt even the air we breathed there. And then I saw him, sitting, or rather sprawled, in the armchair that had been my Jack's, his head hanging to one side, glazed eyes fixed on some invisible point. A thin line of drool ran from the corner of his mouth, staining the shirt already dirty with wine. He looked like a grotesque, deformed version of the man who had attacked me days before. Seeing us enter, his eyes tried to focus, unsuccessfully. He mumbled something unintelligible, a mixture of disconnected words and guttural sounds. He tried to get up, but his legs didn't obey, and he collapsed back into the armchair with a dull thud. "What did you do to me?" he finally managed to articulate, each word coming out slurred as if it weighed tons. "Justice," I replied simply, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Just justice." While Cindy and Aunt Jo began to search the house for the gun and any important documents, I slowly approached Roger. I no longer felt fear. He was clearly incapable of doing me any physical harm in that state. What I felt was a mixture of disgust, pity, and a strange sensation of power that I had never experienced before. "Why, Roger?" I asked, stopping at a safe distance. "Why do that to me? I was your brother's wife. I had just lost my companion of 40 years. He laughed, a grotesque sound, more like a choke. "Always wanted you. Since first day. Jack. Always had everything. Nothing." That confession, even coming from the mouth of a clearly delirious man, confirmed what I already suspected. It hadn't been an impulsive act, driven only by alcohol or opportunity. It was something Roger had harbored within himself for decades, a sick desire mixed with envy of his own brother. And you thought raping me would fix that? That it would make you feel better, more powerful? You liked it, he babbled, his eyes trying to focus on me without success. All like it, in the end. Those words ignited an anger that I didn't know still existed within me. All? How many other women had gone through the same horror at the hands of that monster? How many had been silenced, humiliated, destroyed by him? "Found it!" exclaimed Cindy, returning to the living room with a revolver wrapped in a cloth, exactly as she had described. "It was where I saw it, in the dresser drawer. And I found this too." She handed me a folder full of papers, deeds, bank documents, even the will that Jack had made when he learned of his disease, leaving everything to me and the children. Apparently, Roger was planning some kind of legal scheme, perhaps forging documents or somehow trying to appropriate the house and the few assets that Jack had left. "He's done this before," said Aunt Jo, entering the living room with something in her hand, an ID card that wasn't Roger's. "Found it hidden under the mattress. Belongs to someone named Milton Ferris. The photo was scraped off, probably for him to replace with his own." Document forgery. One more piece of the puzzle that was Roger. A man without scruples, without morals, capable of anything to get what he wanted. "What do we do now?" asked Cindy, looking at Roger with a mixture of disgust and determination. "Is the plan to leave him at the bus station still on?" I looked at the man sprawled in the armchair, my husband's brother, the man who had destroyed my peace, who had desecrated my Jack's memory, who had committed the vilest act possible against me. I felt something harden inside my chest, a cold resolution taking shape. "No," I finally replied. "We have a gun now, and evidence of other crimes. We're going to the police." Cindy and Aunt Jo looked at me surprised. After so much insistence that I didn't want to involve the authorities, my sudden change of plans caught them off guard. "Are you sure, Jenny?" asked Cindy, concern evident in her voice. "You'll have to tell everything. Go through exams, testimonies." "I'm sure," I replied, looking directly at Roger, who now seemed to be slipping into unconsciousness. "It's not just about me anymore. It's about all the others he mentioned, and those who might come after, if he remains free. I can't have that on my conscience." That's how, around 11 at night, 3 gray-haired ladies appeared at the Lancaster police station, dragging a semi-conscious man who could barely stand. The duty officer, a young man recently transferred from Philadelphia, looked at us with a mixture of amazement and confusion. "What's going on here?" he asked, while 2 officers helped put Roger in a chair. "This man raped me 4 days ago," I said, with a clarity and firmness that surprised everyone, including myself. "Then he took over my house, destroyed my belongings, and was planning to steal my property using forged documents." I handed him the gun, now inside an improvised plastic bag, Milton Ferris's ID card, and the documents of my house that Roger had gathered. While the officer examined everything with growing seriousness, I told my story. Not all the sordid details, but enough to make clear the gravity of the crime. "And his condition?" asked the officer, looking at Roger, who was now babbling incoherently, his eyes rolling in their sockets. "Drank too much," Cindy promptly replied. "When we arrived at the house to recover the documents, he was already like this. Must have been drinking all night, judging by the number of empty bottles we saw around." It wasn't exactly a lie. Roger really had drunk a lot, both that night and in the previous days. The officer seemed to accept the explanation, probably used to seeing drunks in similar states. "We'll record your report, Mrs. Jenny," he finally said. "But I need to warn you that cases like this are complicated. Without immediate physical evidence, without witnesses to the act itself." "I know," I interrupted. "I know how it works. But I insist on reporting anyway. And I have witnesses to the assault I suffered afterward. My sister and my aunt found me injured, bleeding. As for the other crimes, the home invasion, the forged documents, the illegal gun, those are easier to prove, aren't they?" The officer nodded, a small smile of admiration forming at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't every day that 3 ladies appeared at his station with such compelling evidence of multiple crimes, speaking with the clarity and determination of experienced lawyers. The following hours were exactly as I feared. Invasive exams at the small-town hospital, detailed testimonies, questions that made me relive the horror of the night of the attack. But in each difficult moment, Cindy and Aunt Jo were by my side, holding my hands, giving me the strength I needed to continue. When the sun began to rise, we were exhausted but satisfied. Roger had been officially arrested, not just for what he did to me, which would be harder to prove in court, but for the crimes of home invasion, illegal possession of a firearm, document forgery, and attempted fraud. Crimes enough to keep him behind bars for a good while. "What do you think will happen to him?" I asked as we slowly walked back home. My home, which I could now reoccupy without fear. "With the record we pulled up in the system, it won't be a short time," Cindy replied. "It seems our dear brother-in-law has previous arrests for similar crimes in Chicago. He was a fugitive, in fact. Maybe that's why he came here when he heard about Jack's illness. He was running from Illinois justice." That information didn't surprise me. Somehow it made sense. Roger had always been the problematic brother, the one who never settled down, who constantly changed cities. Now we knew why. When we got home, the first thing I did was open all the windows, letting the fresh morning air in to carry away the smell of cigarettes and drink that Roger had left. Then, with the help of Cindy and Aunt Jo, I began to clean, to restore, to reclaim my space. We fixed the broken picture frames, replacing the glass. We hung back up the photos of Jack that Roger had thrown in the trash. We washed, scrubbed, polished every surface, as if we could physically remove the traces of his presence in the house. Around noon, when the cleaning was already well advanced, we heard knocks on the door. It was John, my son, with a worried expression on his face. "Mom, what's going on? I just heard that you're here and that Uncle Roger was arrested." I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the most difficult conversation I would have. With Cindy and Aunt Jo by my side, I told John what had happened. Not all the graphic details, but enough for him to understand the seriousness of the situation. I saw his face go from shock to disbelief, then to anger, and finally to a deep pain that broke my heart. Tears flowed freely down his face, so similar to his father's. "Why didn't you call me? Why did you face this alone?" he asked, his voice choked. "I wasn't alone," I replied, holding his hand. "I had Cindy and Aunt Jo with me, and I didn't call you because I didn't want you to carry this burden. I didn't want you to know how low your uncle could sink." "I should have killed him," John murmured, his fists clenched in anger. "I should have suspected when he started acting strange, saying you had traveled." "No, my son," I firmly interrupted. "Violence begets violence. We've had enough of that in this family. Now Roger is in the hands of justice, where he should be, and we will move forward together." In the weeks that followed, the news of what Roger had done spread through small-town Lancaster. I couldn't avoid it. In a town that size, an arrest rarely goes unnoticed, especially when it involves the brother of a man as beloved as my Jack. To my surprise and relief, there wasn't the judgment, the pitying looks, the whispers behind my back that I had so feared. Instead, I received support, solidarity, offers of help coming from the most unexpected places. The community that had loved Jack in life now extended that love to his widow in a time of need. Roger was transferred to Chicago, where he would answer for the crimes committed there before facing Pennsylvania justice. The last news I had of him came through a court officer almost a year later, informing me that he had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for the accumulated crimes in both states. As for me, I slowly began to rebuild my life. The house became again the cozy home that Jack and I had created. The nightmares about the attack gradually diminished, although they never completely disappeared. I began to attend a support group for women victims of violence, where I found understanding and strength to continue. Cindy, my sister who had been my rock in the darkest moments, returned to her own house, but began to spend much more time with me. Gradually, that terrible experience strengthened even more the bonds that had united us since childhood. Aunt Jo continued her work as a faith healer and knower of country herbs. Grandma Eunice's notebook went back into the carved box, safely stored for the day when another woman in the family might need that ancestral knowledge. We hoped that day would never come, but the world isn't always kind to women, especially the most vulnerable. Today, 14 years after those events, I look back and see how that terrible experience transformed me. The pain never completely disappears. It's there, a scar on the soul that occasionally still hurts when the weather changes. But along with it came a strength I didn't know I possessed, a resilience that surprises me to this day. I never remarried, never had another companion. Jack was and always will be the only man in my life. But I'm not alone. I have my children, my grandchildren who are now teenagers, my sister Cindy who continues to be my best friend, and a community that embraced me in the most difficult moments. What I learned and what I would like you, my dears, who are watching me, to take from this story is that it's never too late to fight. It's never too late to seek justice, to regain control of your own life, to say no to those who try to diminish us, hurt us, destroy us. I am Jenny. I am 73 years old, and my story is not just of pain and trauma. It's of overcoming, of courage, of sisterhood between women who united to face evil when all other paths seemed closed. If you're going through something similar, know that you are not alone. There is help available. There are people who will believe you. There is a way out of the darkness, even when it seems impossible to see it. Before ending this video, I want to ask from my heart, if my story touched you in any way, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Grandparents' Tales. This helps bring this message to more people who might need to hear that it's possible to survive, it's possible to start over, it's possible to find justice. And don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing that my stories are reaching different corners of this beautiful country, and how they might be helping others facing their own battles. A tight hug from this grandma, who, despite everything, still believes in love, in kindness, and in our ability to rise again, no matter how many times life tries to knock us down. Until the next video, God bless.